Hey folks, welcome back to another review with yours truly, Sam Healey, right here on the Dice Tower. Today we're taking a look at this little Viking game here called Loot. It's an interesting marriage between worker placement and tile placement. So let's get down to the table and check it out. On your turn, you're basically going to have to do one mandatory action, and that action is placing one of your Vikings out here onto the board. Now, when you place a Viking out onto the board, it has to go next to one of these long ships here, or it has to go to another adjacent Viking. Doesn't have to be your color, it can be any color that's on the board, but that's the requirements. It has to be next to one of these longboats, or it has to be adjacent to another Viking that's already on the board. You also cannot place it in a space where there is already another Viking, so do keep that in mind. Other things that you'll be able to do on your turn are all conditional and or optional. So the conditional things that you can do are take over these buildings that are out here. And each of the different kinds of buildings have a different condition that has to be met for you to be able to take this tile and place it into your fjord. So for a house here, you simply have to have one Viking adjacent to it. And if that's so, then you get to take one of these and put it onto your board. We'll talk about why that's important in a little bit later on. For these watchtowers, you simply have to be able to draw a line with your Vikings between one watchtower and another watchtower. If you do that, you're able to take a watchtower from both sides. Now, for a castle, you have to have a link or a chain of Vikings of 4 or more. And if you're able to do 4, then you're able to take one of these. Only one of those Vikings in that chain have to be adjacent to the castle, but once you have 8 Vikings in that chain, you'd be able to take a second one, and so forth and so on. Now, the reason taking these tiles is important is because you are trying to complete these different construction sites that are on your fjord. So, for example, your port out here wants to have this specific port, wants to have 1 tree, 1 axe, and 1 of these watchtowers in one of these spaces that are adjacent to it. So there are 3 requirements. So 3 out of the 4 of these spaces that are adjacent to this port have to have those elements in it, which is why it's important to get some of these other elements from the board out here. This one over here, for example, my Jarl's house wants to have a watchtower, a house, a gold, and a tree out here in these areas adjacent to it. So that's why it's important to get some of these different tiles from this board and in order to place them into your fjord. Now, there are some optional things that you can do on your turn. One of them is using one of these shields. And these shields basically allow you to bend the rules to your favor for one specific turn. Once you use it, you turn it over and it can't be used again. So these are once per game uses. This one right here simply says that you can place one of your Vikings into a resource area that already has a Viking. This one allows you to place one additional Viking out this turn instead of just one. And this one allows you to take double the resources that you would take this turn instead of just a single share. There is a mini expansion that gives you another shield that you can use, and this is a catapult, which basically allows you to break that adjacency rule that we talked about earlier when placing your Viking out. So you could use this and place your Viking anywhere on the board that you wanted to, not having to be adjacent to one of the long ships or to another Viking that's already on the board. But that's in the mini expansion, not in the base game. You could also claim a trophy on your turn, and these trophies are out here, so once you get up to, this is kind of a push your luck mechanism, once you get up to that many axes on your fjord here, you can claim that at the end of your turn, and it will turn into a number of points for you at the end of the game. But if you choose to forego that on your turn, you can't come back and take it later on. You have to continue struggling for these other ones. Another optional thing that you can do on your turn is claiming one of these long ships. And these longships will do you a couple of different things. It's first of all going to give you possible bonuses to how much the different elements in your fjord are going to be worth in points at the end of the game, or they're going to be giving you bonuses on how you score different elements, different resources at the end of the game, and the different tiles that you have on your board down here as well. So you can choose to take one of these, but it's important to note that these, if you don't have them surrounded by the kinds of tiles that they're looking for example, this one wants 3 trees around it in your fjord. If you don't do that, these are going to be negative points for you at the end of the game. Now, when you place a guy out onto the board, let's say that I have the first turn here and I choose to put my first guy right here. This space right here is going to get me axes. Those are some soldiers, and they're going to get me 1 axe token that I'm going to be able to place onto my fjord. So if I get this axe token, I'm going to see that this one right here, my port, is the one that really wants me to have an axe. So I want to make sure that axe gets put right next to this port tile so that I can start construction on that port. Now, since I'm not next to any buildings, I can't claim any buildings or anything like that, and I can't complete a construction site, though, so those things are out. I don't have enough access to claim a trophy, and maybe I want to, let's see, maybe I do want to try to buff up my castles a little bit, so I'm going to take this guy, and I'm going to put it right here in the middle. That's another thing to note. When you're placing tiles onto your fjord, you can place them wherever you want. Just remember that you have to be careful because each of these tiles do have requirements to finish them. So you have to keep that in mind. If you do take a longship, you'll go into the bag here and draw its replacement, and that will be the end of my turn. As we come over here, now it's their turn. They're going to go ahead and maybe place their dude right here. They don't have to place next to a longship since they placed next to my Viking, so that's okay. And since he has 1 Viking next to this house, he is able to take that, and then they're also going to get the resource of trees. So these 2 tiles are going to be able to be placed in their fjord. So what we might want to do here is we're going to start working on our castles down here. We're going to put this right there, and then we're going to put this right here like that, because both of these elements are required for that castle. And since we do see that we need a number of different watchtowers, we're going to go ahead and take this watchtower longship right here, and we will put it right here in the middle so that we can try to get some gold and sheep around it as well. And then we'll also take a new longship and place it out here, and that's the end of their turn. So after everybody has placed all of their Vikings out onto the table, this is what it will basically look like throughout the course of the game. At the end of the game, you're going to take these score values down here at the bottom of your board and tabulate all of your scores. Let me go ahead and show you how that works with just my score, and you'll get the good idea. So as we look at the scoring here, we basically have these 3 shields down here that tell you the base value of all of the different elements of the game. So all of your main structures are here. All of your additional structures that you get in the board out there are here, and then all of your resources are here. Note that axes are not worth anything at the end of the game because they really just go for trying to get you these trophies. But there are a couple of longships that are added in the mini expansion that will give you points at the end of the game for axes. So as we use the score sheet here, we start at the top where castles are, and we look at how many castles we have. I have 1 castle on the board, and the base value of that castle is 4. But I did get a longship that allows me to add 3 bonus points to that value. So my 1 castle here is worth 4 plus 3 points. So I would take 4 plus 3 and multiply that by how many castles I have on the board. So that gives me 7 points. Then, in similar fashion, I score all the rest of the elements here. So we go to watchtowers first. Watchtowers are worth 2 points, and I don't have any bonuses that adds to it. So it's just simply 2 times how many watchtowers I have. 2, 4, 6, 8. Then I count how many houses I have. 1, 2, 3, 4. And how much are houses worth? They're worth 1 apiece. I don't have any bonuses to that, so I just get 4 points for my houses. How much gold do I have? I have 1, 2 here, and they are worth 2 points each, and I don't have any bonuses for them, so that's another 4 points. Sheep, I have 1 herd of sheep, and they are worth 1 point apiece, so I get a whopping 1 point there. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 trees. I would have gotten a bonus if I had finished this longship, but I didn't, so that's going to be negative points at the end of the game for me. But I did get 1, 2, 3, 4 trees. That's another 4 points for trees. Then I get points for the structures that I did complete, my Jarl's house, my castle, and my port, and that is 21 points altogether. And then I count my points for the trophy. I was able to get 6 axes out there before my opponent did, so I was able to claim the 21 points for that. Then I did have 1 unfinished longship here, which is negative 5 points. But those 2 longships that come in the mini expansion came in handy here, and that gives me 2 points for all of my axes, which is an additional 12. So we'll add that at the end here. So add all of these things up, and you, including the 12 here, and you come to 77 points for this game, and that's how you score loot. Well, that's about that for Loot. This is a game that incorporates a couple of mechanisms that I really enjoy. Worker placement, kind of, and you have tile placement, absolutely. But on top of that, it also has this spatial organization thing going for it that is really captivating, because at first it seems super simple, and it is. Don't get me wrong, and it's a very simple game, not difficult to understand at all, very quick teach, but that really hides, kind of behind a veil, a pretty thinky, puzzly type game. You only have a few spots here on your Fjord player board that you can place things into, and when you start adding longships to that mix, you run out of space really fast. So you have to be very astute, if I can use that word, to where you're placing things on your fjord. And that becomes where the really difficult decisions and the crunchy decisions have to be made. It is a very simple game, absolutely, but I think that hides a little bit of a crunchier game that has a lot of fun decisions that you have to make. It can get a little cutthroat out on the board because you can cut people off, especially if they've already used their shield, which allows them to place in a spot where somebody else already is. If they've already used that, you can really make it harder for them to get those different resources that they're trying to get, or to make those connections to castles and watchtowers that they're really trying to make. So all in all, I think my final thoughts here is that this is a very simple, fun game, but it's hiding, that simplicity and that fun is hiding a pretty crunchy, thought-provoking game that is light, don't get me wrong, but it's also very satisfying. So let's get to my pros and cons. My first pro of the game is the fact that it has that worker placement vibe where you're placing your Viking out there. I really enjoy worker placement games in general. Now, I usually enjoy lighter worker placement games, not the heavier ones that have like 15,000 places where you have to decide where you're going to put your workers out there. I don't usually like games that are like that, but I do like games like this, where you're placing your Viking out there on the board, you're placing your worker out there on the board. He's going to gain you a resource, and he could also capture one of these other structures that are out there for you as well, that you all need to put onto your fjord. I really enjoy that duality that each of those Vikings can give you. They're not just gathering resources for you, they're also capturing these other structures that you need for a fjord. I like it a lot. I really enjoy worker placement, and this one has that very light, fun, kind of frolicky feel to it, but it is also very satisfying and very challenging. My second pro of the game is the tile placement aspect of it, and I already kind of talked about this in my final thoughts, but this fjord player board is really tight. if I can use that word. It's super tight. You can, if you're not careful, you can make mistakes really easily, and that'll affect how many longships you're able to finish, and that could cut you out of the longship race, if we can use that word, at the end of the game, because longships will really give you those bonus points for all of those different structures, and they'll up the multiplier by a significant amount. And if you can't get those longships because you've not placed your tiles well in your fjord, well, that's going to make it hard for you to come out even having a chance at winning, let alone actually pulling out the win. So the tile placement in this was really fun. How you got some of those tiles is also a really fun thing that kind of bleeds over into that worker placement aspect that we just got through talking about. But the combination of these two mechanisms, the worker placement and the tile placement, really worked well for me, and I really had a great time playing this game. My third pro for the game was the modularity of the board. I did like that. It did have a few restrictions on how you could build the board, but generally speaking, you have a number of board tiles equal to the number of players in the game, and you just have to simply put those together. You put the longship tile on one and the trophy tile on the other side of the board, and you're ready to go. I do like how simple it was to build the board. Sometimes modular setups, modular boards can be a little bit confusing with how you can put things out there, but this one was really simple, and it did allow, or it does allow, for slight variation in play from time to time. The fact that they are double-sided, the fact that they are double-sided really makes a pretty cool thing here, because the setups on either side are not the same. So there's adds variability to it, and I like that a lot. I've always liked modular setup, modular board games, and this one took it and made it very simple and yet very fun as well. Another pro was the component quality. Now, we're not talking about a lot of fancy, glitzy type of components here. We're just talking about wood and cardboard. It did have a really neat bag that came in it as well. But generally, you're just talking about wood and cardboard, but it's quality. It's not chintzy stuff. The meeples were in, these little Viking shapes, and I liked those. I liked the colors that were used as well, although there's no green. Sad face. It's a nice game. It's not flashy. There's not a whole bunch of plastic or metal coins or all of that other kind of stuff, but it's good. And I wanted to say that because sometimes I feel like good components are like what people see now as really flashy or glitzy. And while this isn't there, the components are still good. They're still durable, and I think they're going to last for you for quite some time. So it's a thumb up there. So my only con with the game is the scoring at the end. It was just slightly wonky. This isn't a huge con for me, but it was just slightly hard for me to wrap my head around the first couple of times I did it. After I kind of thought about it for a little bit, it wasn't that difficult at all. It's just addition and multiplication. But how to get there, and the way it was worded in the rule book, to me was a little confusing. But that's just me, probably. I don't think this is going to be a huge thing, and it's not a huge con. I just wanted to let you guys know about it so you can give a few extra minutes of understanding before you try to dive into scoring the game. With the scoring sheet, it's not that difficult, but it was just a little wonky on the front end, so I wanted to mention it here as a very minor con. So my rating here for this one is going to be a very strong 8 out of 10. I super enjoyed my plays of this. For some reason, as I was looking into it, I was expecting it to be a little bit more complex than it is. And it super is not. And for me, that was a huge plus because I'm teaching games to new people a lot. And the more games that I enjoy that are simple to teach and simple for people to get a hold of and grab a hold of mentally, the better. And so when I find a game that I enjoy, which this is one of them, and it's easy to teach and it's not difficult to grasp, I'm all in, and that's why I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. That's probably higher than some other people might rate it, but That's why it's their rating and not mine. So my rating is an 8 out of 10. Hopefully you guys can get this to the table and give it a whirl. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys and gals on the flip side. Take care.